Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Hey! Isn't that what I say when I call Captain John Regan? Hey! And that means, hey, John, what do you think? Can you come on there with me? Isn't that how it goes?
Is it Monday already?
And that's what Captain John Regan replies. Is it Monday already? And that could be any day. It could be, I could say, hey, on Sunday, Saturday, Tuesday. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us. Alex is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Captain John Regan's with us. I'm Vincent Finelli. And, John, thank you so much for being with us today, taking time out of your day, time that you cannot replace, time that you're willing to share without compensation. And I really appreciate it. You've got a wealth of information, and you're going to wipe the smiles right off our face.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
As Becky was leaving this morning, she wanted me to tell you, hey. And I told her, hey, might be a sore topic for you.
Oh, man, it is a sore topic. Yeah. I'll tell you why. We had, yesterday, our son and I came back from baling hay. It was absolutely miserable. The sky was just threatening to rain, and we had to get the hay up off the ground, otherwise it would turn moldy. If it got wet, it would turn moldy inside the bales, and the bales they'd be a liability. I mean, they wouldn't be an asset at all. They'd be a liability. Like, what do you do with a 1,000-pound ball of mold? And it takes like a month if you were to put it out in a safe area and just light it on fire and let it burn. It would take a month to burn. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. It's not like wood that would burn relatively quickly. So the whole hay season, first cutting hay season, which has been going on for, a couple of months now. It usually we should be done in a week. But rain every day, every other day, humidity, dampness, cloudy, just miserable. We had two days in a row this season where we had some sun. And we had to get 400,000 pounds of hay cut in two-day periods, and we did it. But I was looking around. We were coming back from baling yesterday. We're pulling the baler behind us in the truck, and I was looking at what the other farmers did, and they made so many mistakes. And I don't know if they believe the U.S. weather, U.S. weather.gov. I don't know if they believe them or weather.com. or the local television weather. I don't know what they're listening to, but they made so many mistakes. They would cut their hay, and then it would rain on their hay. And then they would ted their hay, and then it would rain on that. And then they would rake their hay, and then it would rain on that. And then they would bale their hay in the rain. It's all wasted. All wasted. I mean, these great big balls of mold. So I don't know how this is all going to play out well. In our case, we're okay. But for most of the farmers, they left hay on the fields. They were sloppy when they cut their hay. It would be like if you had a two-bladed lawnmower, and they were set at different heights. Like maybe one was a foot taller than another, and it scalped areas. And just miserably appearing fields when they were done because they were in such a hurry. And then to make matters worse, I asked Mrs. Finelli to call the big independent dealer in our area that sells New Holland equipment, all kinds of big mowers, like 15-foot mowers, hay mowers, hay rakes, bobcats, everything you could possibly think of in the farm and agriculture line, big tractors, little tractors. And all I wanted to know was, what is the price of a water pump for an International 385 tractor, a very common tractor? And I wanted to have a spare one, just in case. And she couldn't get through to the counter to talk to someone to ask them if they could just tell her the price. And that's because they were so busy. They were so busy because all the farmers had broken down equipment. And so we called the John Deere dealer. Same thing. Couldn't get through to a counter person. We used to call them counter men. I think we can still call them counter men. I don't think there are very many counter women, meaning behind the counter at the parts counter. So it's not just New Holland. It's not just the independent dealers. It's John Deere as well. You can't get through. Parts are breaking like crazy. And it's because the hay is so tall, so thick, it's just brutal on the equipment. So that's my take on what happened in the hay department.
Wow. And just so I set up a little bit for today, and the links for today is on the financialstateoftheunion.com. I set the news tab as the home page, so it will take you there already. The bulk of today, I've got a section, the financial end of the road. It was February 22nd, 2012, the very first time I was on the air with you to talk about the financial state of the union. It would take until November 2013 to finally get the book published. And one of the more common questions I had at the time is, how long do we have? That's always the big one. And my answer at the time was, I hope we have 2 to 3 years, because I'm not ready. Still not ready, but I now understand how it got to take this long. And that goes back to over $100 trillion of new debt since this last financial debacle in 2008. You really have to read the book to get the history of what they did with money and everything else, and especially after 1971, where we were taken off the gold standard, and then the years that followed as the currencies of the world were all translated into fiat currencies. They could not play this game without doing so. And after today, I'm not sure there's anything else I can add in the genre of the financial state of the union. I said, we'd see the signs, and the signs are here. I can't tell you exactly when, but some of these are saying real soon. And I hope to get through that section. I've got some other things coming up, and the first on is tech, how your phone can be stolen without leaving your hand. And I really don't like how this attack is called. It's called a SIM swap attack. And if you just read the headline, it might sound like, well, if somebody gets a hold of your phone, they can get your SIM out and, play havoc. No, that's not what this is. This is somebody calling your cell provider and giving them enough information to convince them that they are you, and having your phone number transferred to another SIM. And this is an account of what happened to a tech-savvy guy as he writes for ZDNet, which Ziff Davis was the publisher of PC Magazine, and the absolute hell this guy went through from the SIM swap attack. He has managed to get some things resolved, and not very easily, and still several unresolved issues. And he goes through ways you can protect yourself, especially if you're a T-Mobile user. And this is one of the things, please read this article. If you have a phone that has a SIM card in it, contact your provider and figure out the best way of protecting yourself from this. Because once it happens, it's just like, if you're a victim of identity theft, this is basically a form of that. It takes so much time and money to get your life back in order. You will have wished that you would have followed this. Vincent?
I was in the truck over the weekend. It was late, and I was listening to a broadcast by Kim Commando. Kim Commando is, she calls herself the digital goddess. She's like the self-proclaimed computer technology guru. And she had a commercial on her broadcast. It's nationally syndicated. And I can't believe that people actually listen to her. But her commercial was for something called an iDrive. This is a cloud-type drive. And from what I understand from this commercial, you have your data on your computer, and you receive a drive in the mail, and then you back up your data to this hard drive. Then you send that hard drive to this company. And then from then on, you can back up the rest of your data, the new data, onto the cloud. So the whole thing lives on the cloud. So it's a physical transportation from your PC through a hard drive to get to the company who puts it on the cloud. And then once the bulk of your data is there, the updates, the new data, the changes and so forth, take effect on the cloud. So there lives on the cloud your data. So there's some company that you don't even know who they are. You don't know where the cloud is. It's living someplace. And she's recommending that people entrust their data to the cloud. I can't believe it. It makes, and it's $6 a month. So you can back up your PCs, your Macs, your mobiles, in one account. One account. What a great idea. Put it on the cloud. At least they say it's a great idea. I think it's nuts. Absolutely nuts. So there are people who are allegedly technically savvy who get themselves into trouble. And if you believe them, you're going to get yourself in trouble. In my case, and I have a feeling John Regan's case as well, our data lives where we control it. Because if you don't have it under your control, you don't own it. John, do you agree with what I said?
I'll cover that when we get back.
Yeah, okay. There we go, Captain John Regan. Captain John Regan's with us, and I mentioned iDrive. And iDrive was founded in the late 1990s. And the idea was to provide storage. And I stands for Internet. And at the height of this company, they had about 10 million registered users. And they had partnerships with companies like MP3.com, ZDNet.com, and major universities. So this was considered one of the big technologies to watch. John, your thoughts on storing your data in the cloud?
Well, let me add another level on top of this. The military is getting ready to let, I believe it's a $100 billion contract, probably going to go to Amazon. I think the only other company that's in the running now is Microsoft. And
that's right.
This is kind of a game changer. A lot of data is going to be in the cloud for the military, including a lot of, I don't know what level, but classified information. And this is going to be a game changer on the battlefield, because they can go out and take some drone footage, have current intel for the layout of the battlefield, and through the cloud that can be spread to every person on the field as well as headquarters in nearly real time. It's mind-boggling where some of this tech is going. I believe that cloud backup does have a place. If you have any sensitive information, it would be wise to encrypt it before backing it up to the cloud. But to only rely on backup on site, you risk several things. One is loss of all your data from an event like a fire. You also have another risk these days from the government, and I believe it's only going to get worse, where they come in and confiscate all your tech equipment because you're guilty of things like a hate crime. And that includes the ridiculous hate speech stuff that we're going through right now. I do believe there's room for it. I also believe that you need to have a copy of what you consider important at home, too. So I hope that expresses my feeling on the matter there.
Well, when I ran a data center back years ago, I'm talking about magnetic tape backup. What we would do is we would back up 3 deep, meaning 3 levels deep. So if you could always get back to where you needed to be. If your first backup failed, well, you still had another backup. If your second backup failed, then you still had another backup. And then if your third backup failed, you're out of luck. But what we did was we would put these backups in different locations. We had multiple locations. And that's how we handled it. But none of it was available to be hacked by someone on the internet. That was just not available. And we physically knew where all of our backup copies were. We had records of which copies were where and when, and there were certain recycling dates for the physical media. So that's how I did it. And when I designed systems for the government, like a school, there would be schools had in the offices, they would have a room that was a concrete block room that they would have their safe in, meaning they're safe for currency and other records. And I would put a server in there on an uninterruptible power system with a huge battery, so that's where the backup server for all of the other servers lived. And that's how we did that. And then that server was backed up to another magnetic medium every day. And there were several layers of that deep. So that's how I handled it. I handled it from a physical standpoint, rather than putting it out someplace where I have no idea where it is, meaning the cloud. Captain John, and I'll be right back. Captain John Regan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. And if you go to that address, you'll be able to see the resources for today with all the links, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Captain John?
Let's move down to the history section, and let me do the quick one first. Why gold is money. This has a very interesting graphic in it that walks you through the elements, and I don't know if you can make an argument against the case of why gold is money. If you start with the whole thing, some elements or gases and liquids and wouldn't be suitable, so you remove those. You also have elements that can decay and become radioactive, so those don't really make good candidates for money. You have alkali and alkaline earth metals that are highly reactive. So again, that's not really suitable. Then you've got others that are solid and non-flammable and non-toxic, but you need something that's rare but not too rare. And so you've got some that are very abundant, you've got some that are too rare, so you knock those out. You have the super rare and synthetic elements, take those out. That leaves 5 metals left: platinum, palladium, rhodium, silver, and gold. And of those, palladium and rhodium are pretty much from modern times. And platinum has a very high melting point, so it was not suitable to be worked with really before the technical or industrial revolution. So that left silver and gold. Now, silver does tarnish over time, but it's also less rare than gold. So it works well as money, but you don't have as much value for it. And even, today, if you wanted to try to preserve wealth, you wouldn't want to do that with silver. You'd want to do that with gold. Now, if you were wanting to invest to get return on your money, silver is definitely the way to go over gold. So you take silver out of the equation, and all that leaves is gold. And to give you an idea of how rare gold really is, if you took all of the gold that would be available for monetary usage, divide that up by every person on Earth, it works out to about 1/2 an ounce of gold per person. That's not very much. Vincent?
You're absolutely right. And if you think about that, it's probably just around a wedding band amount for each person. And John, when you mentioned this, you talked about things that make no sense or little sense, really no sense, for use in money, and that's gases and liquids. I mean, it's obvious, but who's really thought about that? You'd never, I wanted to buy a gas. I had a problem with a car, and here's an interesting story, John. I had a problem with the suspension of a Mercedes 2004, and this Mercedes has an air suspension. So in the infinite wisdom of the marketing people at Mercedes, they said, why should we use coil springs like everybody else? Let's use these little airbags that are going to leak. And, for a couple $1,000s, we can charge our customers to replace these every 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years, because their car will just fall down. It will sit on the wheels, and they won't be able to drive anywhere because the trunk will be dragging on the road. So you can't drive it. You'll have to tow it. So I was changing out one of these systems, and I needed to refill a gas bottle that I bought. There was a guy selling an old plumber's torch. It came with a little bottle, like a little larger than a thermos, a cylindrical thermos. And I called the air gas company, and I said, "Do you have these?" And they said, "Yep." I bring it in, and I said, "Well, I'd like a nice one, because mine is a really nice bottle, meaning a steel container. I'd like one that's really nice, equivalent to mine." "Well, bring it in and we'll take a look." Well, all I had to do with these beat up ones. Mine was a bottle, the size is called MC. A slightly larger one is size A bottle, A, alpha. And then the next larger size is B. Now, what do those terms mean? Well, it's hard to keep them all straight, except when you realize what they stood for. It's an acetylene bottle, and it was used for the headlights of vehicles around. Mine was used in a motorcycle. So motorcycles use the MC size bottle. A size bottles were used for automobiles. B size bottles were used for buses. So yeah, it's really great, but I don't have any gas in this bottle, so it wouldn't make much use as a medium of exchange. And how many people would want a bottle of acetylene anyway? So I mean, that's a very, very valid point. And who would want to carry around something that's radioactive? So you're absolutely right. It really does leave, in my world, two things. That'd be gold and silver. And people have tried copper. You know, copper's okay, but it's so common that you'd have to have like a busload of it, you know, to have any substantial amount. And you can't carry a busload with you. So that brings us right down to what you said. Gold, number one. Silver, number two, in terms of portability. I'm with you.
And the other article in history, it's rhyming again. You know, basically history repeats itself. Not so much exactly, but it starts to look alike. And this is an article that Bill Federer put out yesterday on Bastille Day. And I do highly recommend you sign up for his daily email. I don't get a chance to really read all of them, but the lessons of history in the right light unveils so much. And the way history was taught, even when I went to school, so much of what happened was occulted just by the way they presented the terminology of the history. And I probably like everybody, I knew about the French Revolution. I didn't really understand it so much until I read this article. And to put it in time frame, July 14th, 1789 is when the Bastille was stormed in France. It was just March of that year that our Constitution went into effect. So this is very, very early on in American history. And what I didn't really realize is that this revolution was a revolution against God. And the reign of terror that went on, the people they began accusing, arresting, and beheading, first all the royalty, then the wealthy, then the farmers and businessmen, then those hoarding food, then the religious clergy, then the former revolutionaries. And if you've ever listened to the interview with Yuri, I believe it's Bezmenov, it was a Soviet defector. This interview was done back in the 80s. This is pretty much the typical, communist, socialist, anti-God formula. And this is where the metric system was imposed, because it was based on 10, because we have 10 fingers and 10 toes. Another way of saying, man's over God. And the new secular government proceeded to forbid crosses as being offensive. Religious monuments were destroyed. Statues were torn down. Public and private worship and education outlawed. Priests and ministers, along those that harbored them, were executed on sight. Christian graves were desecrated, and churches were closed or used for immoral or other purposes. And to me, we're so close to seeing, well, we're already seeing some of this in the United States. And I only expect this to get worse. You go through other items in history, 1917, the Russian Revolution, Again, another revolution against God, godless communism. We had the Nazis in Germany in the 30s. And it's always, first they came for, then they came for. And by the time they got to me, there was nobody left to stand up against them. And these cycles just seem to happen again, and again. And I wish there were ways around it, but you have to not only have people awake, you have to reach the people that are so bought into the system and get them to have a change of heart. So that's why I'm not very optimistic on actually accomplishing change that would prevent this. In fact, we even see this, thousands of years ago. If you've read the book of Exodus, and the way I summarize it is you could take the slave out of Egypt, but you couldn't take Egypt out of the slave. Even after all the miracles that those people saw firsthand. And today, here we are. I think the big difference with the United States, instead of the revolution, which is the typical communist socialist game plan, you had the progressives, which are the evolutionary socialists. And we're now getting deep into the end game there. And in fact, I went in and looked, and you can use Wikipedia for this. I'll look up the presidential elections. I went back to the first Clinton election and looked at the demographics of how the vote went. And when you do that, you can readily understand why the Democrats hate white men and strong Christians. And I'll just quickly detail that when we get back.
Yeah, and how do you pronounce the name of the guy, Maximilien de Robespierre? Is that how you pronounce his name? The guy that encouraged, this reign of terror? Is that how you pronounce his name, John?
I'm not good with French, even though I've got French ancestry.
Captain John Regan's with us. Captain John, please continue.
And going through the demographics of the elections, going back to the first Clinton election, there's only two demographic groups that the Democrats have not captured during that time frame. The first is white men. The second is basically church-going Christians, and that does not include Catholics or Jews. Most of the time, the Catholics and Jews ended up siding with the Democrats. But for Christians that attended church at least once a month, those have been solid, not by much, but majority, voting to the supposed opposition party of the Republicans. And as soon as the Democrats can finish marginalizing those two groups, we will have the one-party rule just like they did in the Soviet Union. Let me just round out the current events here. Women's soccer equal pay. Those poor, overpaid crybabies want more money. And this links back to a show that we did earlier where I talked about the Social Security report. The latest one's from 2017. The 2018 numbers will come out later this year. But for the most recent numbers that we have, equal pay for all workers, everything they made divided by the number of workers is $48,251.87. So, let's have those crybabies, send into the government everything they made over $48,251, and see if they continue to complain.
You're talking about Megan Rapinoe, this pink-haired lesbian, and her band of ball chasers?
Exactly. There's no doubt they're talented, but to say that they're not getting enough money, these entertainers, to me, are too overpaid as is. And they also tend to be the ones complaining about people aren't making enough. Well, fine. Yeah. The only way to get that money is for you to give yours up.
The Kardashian ilk has a whole bunch of real estate. I mean, they are beyond decadent. They flaunt their flagrant, reckless spending in people's faces as if we should envy their recklessness. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. And Kanye West, or Ye, I think he calls himself now, his sneaker line is worth $1 billion. Really? How does that, John, I don't understand how that happens. What actually does the Kardashian tribe, clan, group, I don't think you can call them a family because they're dysfunctional. What do they contribute to society? What? Do they teach anything? What do they teach? I mean, they invent new ways of bending over. Other than that, what can you learn from them? I can't think of anything except what a sin excess is. And they're like the poster tribe for excess. I don't get it. I don't get how they have followers. I don't get why anybody would pay attention to them. I don't get why they can take pictures of themselves and say, look at me, and people will actually look at them. The only reason I find out about them is I trip over them when I read the news. You're right. Crybabies. Please continue.
And unfortunately, people love the lies, and that goes back to Adam and Eve in the garden. They chose the lies over what God told them to do. It only took 3 chapters from creation to deception. And people want to be able to do anything they want without consequence. And the more people act like there aren't consequences, the more we see what the consequences are. Unfortunately, as we unfortunately seen on the news lately, people keep on licking and posting.
Yeah. And I was reading an article, I just glossed past the headlines, that the amount of electricity that is used on internet pornography would power an entire country. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how sick this planet really is? And that explains why I have almost stopped helping people because of their sicknesses. I don't want any part of it. John and I'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. Captain John Regan's with us. Captain John, I want to make a comment. I'd love to hear your reaction. So I've been a member of Sam's Club for, I think, 26 years. And, several years ago, they implemented self-checkout at the one that I seem to like the most in Springfield, Missouri. And they had 4 stations. So 4 people simultaneously could check out, and it's caught on. I can't believe it. So now half of the checkout stations are self-service, meaning you do it, your self-checkout. Instead of having an employee run your items through the register, you do it. But something else has happened. Now, in the front of the store, or warehouse, they have these flatbed carts that are filled with orders. And I counted them. At first, there were just a couple, maybe 2 years ago. the last time I was there a week ago, there were 50 flatbeds filled up with all kinds of things with numbers on them, like number 27, 62, great big signs that said, this is yours. This is number 26. And so what people are doing is they're ordering online. And so instead of having cashiers cash you out, they've got people running around the store picking up the items that you used to pick up. So you used to pick them up and put them in a cart. Now the cashiers are running around the store putting your items in the cart, and they have self-checkout for those who actually show up at the store. So now we are so lazy, John, that we don't even want to go shopping. So the employees will fill up a cart or a gondola or a flatbed with toilet paper, paper towels, and candy, and bottled water, and TVs, and, these other items they sell. I don't understand. I guess I'm living in the wrong time. I kind of like looking at each item and making sure the box is not smashed, the can's not dented, whatever it is. I might look at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different items and compare them. Not anymore. Why go through all that hassle? All you have to do is get on your flat screen and click the items that you want, and the hassle of pushing that cart around, we'll let somebody else do that. Have you seen that where you are?
Absolutely, and it's one of those things that it's tough to see how that's going to survive the upcoming recession, because that labor cost has to be taken care of one way or another. With Walmart and their grocery department, you have to place an order for at least $35 to take advantage of that. Kroger charges a small fee. It's a larger fee if you want delivery to your house. But there definitely are certain advantages for certain people. If you have limited mobility, things of that nature, it's certainly a nice service to have. But again, it's additional costs, just like all the delivery of menus of meals, including fast food. That's an additional cost over something that's probably on your way home anyway. And it's like I say, with the next recession, I don't know how much of that's going to survive.
I know this is a tangent, John, but just to continue a little bit more, I decided that because so many states banned phosphate, and we have an old antique washing machine that has an agitator, I decided to get a lifetime supply of phosphate detergent or laundry detergent. So I looked on the internet, and I found that it was really hard to find. And Sam's Club was always running out of a product called Wind, W-I-N-D, fresh, 35 pounds. And it was $16, I think, maybe $16.48. But if you had a Sam's Club membership that was like their deluxe membership, you had free shipping. So I ordered, I can't believe this, I ordered 35-pound buckets of Wind Fresh from Sam's Club in Springfield, Missouri for $16 and change per bucket delivered. And I used the tax zone where our town is, which is one of the lowest in the state of Missouri. It's, I think, 6.1 versus 8-point-something% in Springfield. So I had it delivered. I paid less tax for it. And they shipped 35-pound buckets for free. It makes no sense. No sense at all. So I decided, what exactly did I pay? Was it $16.48? I wasn't sure of the exact change, so I looked it up. It just went up to $18.13 because I think Sam's Club figured out, we can't do this anymore. We can't be shipping for free. Have we lost our minds? So they're trying to recover some of that cost. And then Walmart sells it for $32.95. Bottom line, class, is if you use that particular laundry detergent and you can get it shipped for free, and you can engineer an address, a billing address that is lower than where you buy it in the city, you'd be crazy not to. And that's what I do. And that's called tax avoidance. It's not illegal. Tax evasion is illegal. Tax avoidance, perfectly legal. Captain John?
Well, let's move into the financial end of the road, recession time. I've been saying for years that this next recession is the one that we don't get up from, and I still will not be able to tell you at what point people will understand that this isn't just another recession like most of us have experienced several times over our lifetime. This article was posted on Zero Hedge just yesterday. There was a recent report from the New York Federal Reserve Bank with their latest recession indicator, and it rose to 32.9% in June, practically 33%. And just before the graphic, there's a quote from Lisa Shallett, who is the Chief Investment Officer for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. So this isn't an amateur person. This is a high-level professional. In the past, every time since 1960 that this index has breached 30%, a recession followed. And I'll just make one comment on that. If you look at the chart, there was actually one time that it breached that back, looks like 1968, that it came down and there was not a recession for about 2 years. But if you look at the chart, every other time it has reached this level, we were already in a recession. But a recession can't be declared until you have 2 quarters of data showing negative GDP. Of course, with all the fake GDP numbers, that's even getting hard to tell as well. So, like I say, it's hard to use the past totally as an indicator, but this gets very, very close. We've seen so many, and I've brought many of these up, indicators over the last couple of years that have only been at those levels during a recession. But keep in mind, we've had tons and tons of new debt that has kept us from experiencing what we should have experienced long ago. And all of that new debt works up until a point, and that point is when you are no longer able to meet the debt service. And that's what many of these other articles are going to be talking about as well. The next two, National Debt Spiral and the PDF of the Treasury presentation, that's a link in that article, National Debt Spiral. I've talked about before, so I don't want to go too deep into that. Especially the Treasury presentation, it's not a very easy thing, even with the financial education. I put it up there just to show that this is the actual information and chart that the Treasury used, just so people don't say it's a made-up thing. And we're looking at, in just a few years, it can possibly vary a little bit, but about 4 years, we get to the point where, from what we bring in taxes, it's not enough to pay for the interest on the federal debt. And I don't want to use those two articles anymore in depth. I found another one at the end of June from John Malden, and he basically puts all government together, including Social Security and Medicare mandatory spending. So it uses the mandatory spending as a base. Defense is on top of that. And, yes, we're paying more for defense than we should be because we're supporting the American empire. There's legitimate defense needs, and while we could reduce that some, we can't eliminate it. So defense is stacked on top of there, then interest, and then the non-defense discretionary spending. Then they run a line through that, tax revenue. And it turns out that, we had a problem back, when we had the crash in 2008. And that went along until looks like about 2012 or so, where tax revenue wasn't enough to pay all the national interest. And then that went up for a little while to around 2014. And then tax revenue kind of leveled off to the point where around 2016, again, it was no longer able to pay for all of interest and the non-defense discretionary spending. And we'll continue on this sad journey when we get back.
Yeah, I got a couple quick questions. Shouldn't take too long to answer. I'm really curious about these two items. Captain John, I'll be right back. Class, sometimes you wonder just what went wrong. During the break, I went into the kitchen. I grabbed a cup of coffee, and our two boys were in the kitchen, and I gave the closest one, as I was walking toward the coffee, gave him a hug, and I said, "Wow, you got bigger." And, he lives here. I mean, I see him all the time. I said, "You got bigger?" And he goes, "No, I lost 9 pounds." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I got circumcised." I never heard that before. So, John, you kind of wonder, right? What went wrong in the process? So here are my questions. Do you believe, in your opinion, that there's any gold backing our currency, or is our monetary system just a concept, a belief, an illusion?
Well, we've gone into detail in this. The Treasury does a report on the federal gold holdings. Now, even if all the gold is there in Fort Knox, and I believe the New York Fed holds the rest, and even when you value it at today's prices of gold, not the $35 an ounce that they use, it's such a small amount compared to the massive amount of currency that's been created since 1971. So it's all fictional. I've written where if we wanted to go back on the gold standard, I believe it was in the neighborhood of $30,000 an ounce is what gold would have to be valued at just to cover the currency in the world. The other way is to reset the value, in which case we'd have to reprint the money. And for every $100 Federal Reserve note you currently have, you'd get 10 cents. That's how much we've gone beyond what a gold standard would have constrained us to. And without that gold standard, it's allowed this massive debt, it's allowed the massive wars, it's allowed the massive tech intrusion into our lives. I don't know how much further you want me to go on that.
No, that was the point, that we believe that a piece of paper or fabric with a dead president on it, for the moment, that says a 100 is worth 10 times as much as one that says 10 on it. We just believe that. But in actuality, it's just a concept. It's an illusion. It's just our opinion that there's more value with a 100 than a 10. I guess you and I are saying the same thing. The other question I have for you is I just went down this rabbit hole last night looking at Social Security. I was looking at some YouTube videos, and there are these guys, and they're all saying a similar thing. Look, if you wait until you're 70 instead of 66 to retire, you're going to get so much more money back from Social Security that you'd have to be almost crazy not to wait until you're 70. But the people who take their Social Security earlier are doing it because they don't believe Social Security is going to be funded, and they want to get what they can while they can still get it. That's my thought. What is your thought, John? And just quickly, do you think Social Security is going to be around 20 years from now?
Let me cover the taking it early. First off, you do get a good hit permanent reduction in your Social Security benefits. But some people, and I'm one of those, that's my only option to have an income right now. So that's why a lot of people are taking it early. Some people are also taking it early because they believe that there's going to be a reduction, which has actually been in the news. And depending on which article you read, it's a 20 to 25% reduction. And I'll cover the rest of that when we get back.
Yeah. Yep. I'm looking forward to hearing about this because this is of concern to so many of us who listen to USA Prepares and who are in class with us today. Yeah, class, I kind of took us on a tangent about Social Security. My question is it going to be around? John, your thoughts?
Well, first let me just say that the courts have already decided that the government is under no obligation to provide you any benefits. But unless Congress changes the current law, here's how it works. So long as they're working on the trust funds, until those are exhausted, which I think the last report was saying 2035, 2036, and I think that's way over optimistic. But until the trust funds are exhausted, you will get 100% of what Social Security says that you're due to receive. However, when those trust funds run out, and this is what I was referring to just before the break, it's somewhere around a 23% reduction in benefits across the board. Because at that point, Social Security is limited to paying out the amount that it brings in taxes. So under that definition, Social Security will be around. It cannot go broke, but the Ponzi scheme has reached the point where it can only pay out what it brings in, not what it's promised. After I finished this article, well, I got another article on Social Security that will explain some things. But the reasons I believe that some of this is way over optimistic is whether you look at the Social Security trustee report or the additional report that Professor Kolikoff does every year, which is based on CBO numbers. Neither one of those scenarios have built into them job losses from the next recession, job losses from the upcoming automation, artificial intelligence, and robotics. And it also doesn't count, what happens if we reach the point where we can't find enough fools out there to buy Treasury products in order to fund more debt. Because if the Treasury auctions fail, then they will not be able to sell Treasury products in order to get cash to pay out from the trust funds. Does that answer the question for you?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from my perspective, I'm glad I took it a little bit early. I didn't believe, no matter what they say, that they're going to be around, meaning Social Security. So I wanted to get what I could while I could still get it. And I'm not one of these guys that thinks, I'm not going to deal with the government. They have stolen money from me for my entire life. And when I say stolen, I mean stolen. And the reason I use that word is because given the opportunity to not participate, I would have not participated. But I had no choice. They took money out of my income because they had a gun to my head. Otherwise, I would not have participated. So I want it back. It's as simple as that. I want it back. And I'm going to try to live as long as possible, and I want Mrs. Finelli to live as long as possible to get as much as we can back from that theft. And that's how I look at it. John, do you think that that's an improper way of looking at it, or do you think that's accurate?
I think the idea is to get what you can. However, if you are currently working and making more than about $15,000 a year and you're below the full retirement age, you probably do not want to take it because they confiscate 50%, of every dollar you make above whatever their current cap is.
Right.
And if you are working, you're probably making more than what Social Security would be anyway. But otherwise, whenever you can take it, I would take it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good.
Okay,
what's next?
We're on the link. We're already underwater. Just want to scroll down a little bit, and it has a chart adjusted to assume a 2020 recession. And when that happens, on this chart by like 2022, there is no longer enough tax revenue coming in to even fully fund mandatory spending, much less defense, net interest, and non-defense discretionary spending. And I believe this chart assumes that this recession would actually have a recovery. And even at that point, it only gets mandatory plus a little defense. There is no point past 2022 where it gets to be able to where it can pay interest on the debt, which is called default and causes all kinds of interesting problems. Let me run through some of these others real quick because I want to spend some time on the last one for what time we have left. Back in May, Professor Kotlikoff wrote an article, Social Security just ran a $9 trillion deficit and nobody noticed. And what he's saying is between last year's trustee report and this year's trustee report, Social Security is $9 trillion worse off than it was. And to put that number in perspective, if you take all of the wages, salaries, and commissions, that totals just a tad over probably $7 trillion now. So even if you took 100% of all that in taxes and you only applied it to the Social Security program, you still wouldn't have enough money to keep it from getting in worse shape. So that's the additional information on Social Security there. The pension death spiral crisis is getting worse. The unfunded liabilities on those, and the reason that is more important right now is a lot of the Social Security and Medicare payments are in the future, whereas these pension plans are actually having to pay out now, and a lot of them have been patched. But with the next recession, that puts them so far underwater that they'll find out there is no patching. We've talked about zombies before. I just want to refresh memories on that. And this is another article from John Malden, and he talks about zombies and unicorns. The unicorns are these tech companies that have unreal market caps and no profit, if any, and it's just unreal. But there is the latest report from Bank of International Settlements of 32,000 listed companies in 14 advanced economies. If a business is at least 10 years old and has been unable to cover their interest charges for 3 consecutive years, which that's a relatively low bar, they say that 12% of companies do not make enough profit to cover their interest. And companies, unlike countries, can't print money to get out of this problem. And before we get to the last article, I just want to bring up that we've hit the debt limit, I believe it was back in March. And Congress is getting ready to go on vacation up on the 26th and not due to come back until shortly after Labor Day. The problem is that, and they know about this, and they're trying to work on a plan to extend the debt ceiling, is that the Treasury will run out of money before Labor Day because the deficits are getting worse. So that is one of the factors coming up this fall, the fight over the debt ceiling, plus all the funding for the government next year. And that leads us to the last article I labeled No Good Choices. And here's what will happen when real panic begins to unfold. And when you look at the chart, stocks, bonds, property, they go into this bubble, and then when that corrects, it tends to go down to a particular level. And when you look at where we are, it's at the most extreme point it's ever been. So what he's saying here is stocks will decline by 75 to 95%. Bonds will lose 90 to 100% of value, because not only will companies not be able to pay their debt, there are some other governments, even countries, not able to pay their debt. And even when you look at the Great Depression, there were people that were heavily invested in municipal bonds that basically lost their entire fortune because municipalities defaulted on their debt. Properties, 75% to 95%, and interest rates at 15% plus, kind of reminiscent of the 80s there. And even cash is no longer certain. Our currency is worth practically nothing compared to what it was in 1913. The government technically owns the currency. They can pretty much do what they want with it. And even trying to protect yourself with gold or silver is problematic. So you look at, again, 1933, FDR made owning gold illegal. There has been a precedent, and there's nothing to stop that from happening again. So there's not a lot of good options there. And, I've talked about this several times this year. If I believe it's going to get really bad here in the United States for a number of reasons, and that's one of the reasons I used the Bastille Day article today. We're already seeing how nasty it's getting when the Democrats aren't in charge. And even if Trump does win next year, which there are some scenarios where we could end up with, President Bernie, whoever comes after Trump, even if he's a Republican, is going to be another politician. And once the recession hits, we're probably going to see things like the Great Depression, where the voters turn everything over to the Democrats. And that's where it'll start to get real nasty and finish up when we get back.
Captain John Regan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Captain John Regan's with us. Just a very quick comment. I asked GCN to eliminate all of the USA Prepares owned commercials, which George, our chief engineer, did, and I really appreciate that. And, it's because I'd rather have more talk time. But I've got to tell you, the commercial that Lily does, the tax doctor, I think is one of the absolute best commercials ever produced for radio. And I get a kick on it. And Mrs. Finelli came into the studio during the commercial, and I said, you got to hear this. And I said, is that one of the best? And she said, absolutely. So just my comments. Mark the Spark in Philadelphia, welcome. You're on with Captain John Regan.
Hello, gentlemen. And before I get started, you better hide all the flammables and combustibles. And it's good to be in presence with the great aggregator and the great aggravator.
Wait, who's who? Hold it. Who's who?
John's the great aggregator. You're the aggravator.
Okay.
those are positives. So I'm in a dilemma. A dilemma. How you spell it? Okay. Truth with a capital T. Okay. So let's say that I wanted to ask you, Vince, if somebody attacked us and then they denied it, they attacked us and killed some of our shipmates and wounded a whole bunch of others, and then they later denied it. Should you and I ever do business with them? Ever?
And we are absolutely certain that they attacked us?
Yes.
They attacked us. We know they attacked us. We're certain they attacked us. They denied the truth that they attacked us. Should we do business? Absolutely, positively not. Okay.
Now let's go further. Let's say there are those also our shipmates, and this is in the present now, also on our shipmate, our shipmates, our fellow shipmates, and we're in the midst of a storm, and it's coming at it from every direction at us, and we're doing our best to keep the ship righted, to keep it from going down, right? And there's been a call, all hands on deck, and we think every one of our shipmates are up on deck helping us, trying to fight this storm to make it through it. But then later we discover that there's some of them missing, and they're down in the hold, drilling holes in the hull. We're taking on water, not from the storm, but from our fellow shipmates. Now, this is an analogy.
Yeah,
so back
that's
to
a
the
darn
deal
good
about
one.
doing business. Here's the deal about doing business with the enemy. So you and I wouldn't do business with somebody who would attack us. We would consider them an enemy. But what about our fellow shipmates? Should we do business with those shipmates we find out who are doing business and promoting the very enemy that attacked us and hurt us before, killed many of our fellow shipmates, and wounded many others? Should we do business with those we consider shipmates? Should we do business with them?
Of course not. And here's the proof. I stopped doing the meetups because of exactly those guys with the drills.
Exactly. So I'm in a dilemma because
wow, that's interesting. What are those tones?
Hello?
You still there, Mark?
I'm here.
Okay, we keep hearing tones. You're in a dilemma because?
Well, because I'm discovering that there are those in our midst who are doing business with the enemy. Now they act like they're not. I don't know that they've been bamboozled, if they've lost their mind, or if they are knowingly doing business with the enemy. And I won't do business with the enemy. And anyway, in the name of truth at the capital T, Truth with a capital T supports our families and our communities for multiple generations, so that we could all have better lifestyle, hopefully a better life for all.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark and Captain John, but IBM did business with the Nazis. They built the machinery to count how many people were being imprisoned in the concentration camps. IBM. Ford did business with the Nazis, and the Bush family, as in Junior and Senior, their family did business with the Nazis. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well,
so we have big names. Ford's pretty big. IBM's pretty big, or they were. And the Bush family, pretty big in politics. And they all did what you are talking about, doing business with the enemy, which is treason.
So I posed that question to you. I'll leave you with that, Vincent. And thank you.
Mark, the Spark. So are you the agitator? Well, Captain, we ran out of time. Again.
I'm shocked.
Thank you so much for being with us. I'm looking forward to doing it again and again and again. My dear friend, Captain John Regan, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com.